Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mira Baalberg. I'm a professor in the History Department and endowed chair in Ancient Jewish Civilization here at UC San Diego. And I'm welcoming all of you today in my double capacity as a member of the Faculty Advisory Committee of the Jewish Studies program and as co-director of the Classical Studies program, both of which are sponsoring this event. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I want to start by thanking Professor Lisa Lampert-Weissig, the director of the Jewish Studies program, for her leadership and hard work. She's spearheading our very welcome transition from 2.5 years of remote events to in-person activity, and in general, managing the program's various challenges in a really skillful, kind, and level-headed way. So thank you, Lisa, for all your work. I also want to express my deep thanks to Jennifer Schwarzkopf, who is the pillar who holds the Jewish Studies program together, and especially to Madison Martinez, who is our event coordinator for the Institute of Arts and Humanities, who made all of this happen, the lovely spread you just had, and there will be more of it after the event, and really everything having to do with our event. So thank you so much, Maddie. And now it is my special pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, Dr. Avigail Manekin-Bamberger of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. A truly unique and innovative scholar. She's going to be so angry with me for saying this, but deal. A truly unique and innovative scholar whose work creates bridges between different areas in the study of ancient Jewish history that are usually not in conversation with each other. Dr. Avigail Manekin-Bamberger combines a specialty in rabbinic literature, the robust legal, ritual, theological corpus of late ancient Judaism, with a specialty in ancient Jewish magical texts and practices. You'll hear more about what ancient Jewish magic means shortly, but for now I'll just say that this work includes painstaking work of decipherment and reconstruction of some of the coolest materials that have survived from Jewish antiquity. By bringing these two specialties together, she's showing connections that were not considered before between what was considered elitist, formal, authoritative Jewish discourse and what was relegated to the margins of Jewish history and was either not considered at all or considered popular, vulgar, superstitious. Her forthcoming book explores the connections between rabbinic court procedures and legal language and the terminology of curses, incantations, and other magical practices in late antique Babylonia. For example, many of you probably know that in the Jewish tradition, a divorce document is called a get, but I'm assuming you didn't know that you could give a get to a demon. So that's one thing you may learn today. Ultimately, what Dr. Manekin-Bamberger is charting out is a path for a different approach to Jewish social history in late antiquity, a notoriously difficult undertaking because of the dearth of evidence. She's using magical text to explore the lives and experiences of those whose voices are not usually heard through the more familiar documents. And I can share with you that her current work on enslaved people, as they're represented in magical materials, is absolutely fascinating. The title of her talk today is Jewish Magic and Jewish History in Antiquity, and having heard Avigail give a number of talks before, I know that we're in for a treat. So please help me welcome Dr. Avigail Manekin-Bamberger to UCSD.
Okay, thank you very much for that exaggerated introduction. And I really want to begin by expressing my thanks also to you, Mira, except for this introduction, for the invitation. And it's really great to be here. And thanks to Maddie for all of the work with the flights and everything else. So thank you so much, and to the rest of those who facilitated this visit. So thanks, and for all of you for coming. So I want to begin today the talk with a scholar by the name of Professor Mordechai Margaliot, who was a scholar of rabbinic literature, and he worked on rabbinic compositions from Antiquity, Midrash, and other compositions, and he also made a scientific edition of a composition called the Book of Mysteries, which is a late antique Jewish magical handbook, meaning a grimoire, a book of different recipes and instructions for magical acts, as we will soon see. Now, in his introduction, he tells how he started researching this strange subject. So this is a quote, a translation from the introduction. So he tells about himself. One day in June 1963, I was sitting in the Cambridge University Library and browsing through the huge collection of the Geniza manuscript in the Taylor-Schechter collection. So he was sitting with the Geniza manuscripts, the medieval manuscripts from the Ben Ezra synagogue in Cairo, with manuscripts dating from the 9th to the 19th century. And he then says, when I got to the file of Kabbalistic writings, amulets, adjurations, and the like, file K1, which is my favorite file, I went through it hastily and without interest, until I came across large, damaged, and blurry pages, and my eyes fell on a few lines that caused great interest and wonder in me. Amongst the list of names of angels used in the high heavens, I found this strange wish. And now he's quoting from the manuscript that he saw. If you wish to race horses, and this is in Hebrew, if you wish to race horses, even when they are exhausted, so that they will not stumble in their running, and they will be swift as the wind, and the foot of no living thing will pass them, and they will win popularity in their running, take a silver leaf, a lamella, and write upon it the names of the horses and the name of the angels, and here it goes on to say the specific divine names, and take the lamella and conceal it in the racing line, in the hippodrome, of the one you wish to win. So Mordechai Margaliot is sitting in Cambridge. This is actually not him, it's Salomon Schechter, but he's sitting in some sort of room with all of these. What you see here is boxes or files of different manuscripts. When he sees this specific page, and I don't know if any of you could see the Hebrew here, but it says, Im bikashta la'arit susim, if you wish to race horses. And it immediately catches his eye. On the bottom of the manuscript, you could see is this working? Yeah, the names of the angels with the lines on top of them. And then he thinks to himself, this passage caused me a lot of confusion. I wondered, why is a Kabbalist, proficient in the secrets of the heavens and the angels, interested in horse races? Is it not sacrilegious to include in one breath the name of horses and the name of angels? Is it even appropriate to bother the angels of the heavens with racing horses? So he is really surprised and astonished, I may even say a bit repulsed from this a person who is writing this, who obviously has knowledge of names of angels, but uses this knowledge to try and win chariot races. And he later on recognizes specific Greek terms that are appropriate to chariot races, and he understands that this is an antique or a late antique manuscript when chariot races were part of a very major part of the culture. And this, in a way, this introduction, he later also says how difficult it was for him to work on the Book of Mysteries because he felt that it's not appropriate to the Jewish religion, and he says that each time he wanted to stop, and his colleagues told him to continue because it is important. We have lots of Greek terms, etc. And he ends with the introduction by saying that he decided to continue this work even though it's so superstitious, because then one can see how the rabbis are different and how the rabbis had to deal with these masses, and then their shining light is much brighter. And for me, this is really telling in a few ways. First of all, it is very, it really can describe to us what earlier scholars, and also some scholars, contemporary scholars, think about magic texts, that they are popular and not important, and that people that know divine names and Kabbalists shouldn't be dealing with these sorts of texts. And on the one hand. On the other hand, it also reveals to us that if we look at these texts, we find participation of Jews in this case, it's chariot races, but we could find all different kinds of issues of history that have to do with social history that we didn't know before, such as men and women who are searching for love, and different disputes, or the fear of the evil eye, all sorts of things that many people were occupied with. And really, the chariot races are a good example because from rabbinic literature, it was forbidden to go and participate. But we have also this manuscript, and also a very new discovery that wasn't even published yet. It will be published by Rivka Elitzur Lyman and Margareta Folmer in the next few months. It's a Jewish-led curse tablet from the Hippodrome in Antioch. And what happened was there was a Princeton excavation in the 30s, in the 20th century, in the 30s. And also in the Hippodrome of Antioch, and many curse tablets were found in that excavation, curse tablets that were intended to interfere with the race, and just as we saw in the instructions, to cause certain horses to win. And all of these were in Greek, and there was just one tablet that the museum kept closed because it was preserved in a way that could show the practice of how these were used. So this specific curse tablet was folded 7 times, and then there was a needle in the middle of the tablet that was an aggressive act to cause some sort of damage to the horses and to the charioteers. So a few years ago, they decided to try and open it with special technology. And when they opened it, they saw that it wasn't Greek letters, rather Hebrew letters, and in the dialect of Jewish Palestinian Aramaic. And it was very clear also from the content that this is a Jewish text, because there was a specific use of biblical motifs, such as invoking the angel that stopped the donkey of Balaam in the biblical account, and invoking this angel to stop the horse of the other team. So we have here an example of, on the one hand, a manuscript with an instruction of this chariot races, and on the other hand, actual product from the 5th or 6th century CE, and both could show us of Jewish participation, in this case in Antioch, in this culture, something that we wouldn't have known just from the text that survived, the Jewish texts that survived, the literary texts, which are rabbinic texts. And this is part of a larger phenomenon in late antique Palestine, where we find these lamellae, amulets that are inscribed with different formula, with divine names and angels that are summoned to bring protection to the person who is wearing these different amulets. So many times they were, and in some of the cases you could even see, like for example, in the gold one, maybe you could notice these lines, which are actually, it was folded and rolled and worn in a necklace. And half of the people who, there are about 100 of these, specifically Jewish ones, and half of the people that wore these were women. We know this because in all of these different texts, there is a mention of the client, of the person who purchased it. And because of that, we could learn about specific named people that wore these objects in the time of the Talmud, in the late Antiquity, and specific things that they suffered from, what worried them. When it is women, a lot of times it had to do with childbirth or with different problems that had to do with babies, etc. and different purposes to ward off curses, evil eye, and of course, demons, as Mira mentioned. So this is just an example of that could, we could imagine these different people. It could have been children, women, and men wearing these amulets. Now, the field of Jewish magic is very much just, I was talking about it in relation to Margaliot. We're just in the beginning of this, of exploring these texts, also because new texts are being discovered, but also because scholarship was reluctant to look at this as sort of something scientific to investigate. And now we are getting to a point in scholarship of also looking at new texts and deciphering them, but also trying to draw historical conclusions and learn different things about daily lives of men and women from that time. Now, I want to move from Israel to the Sasanian Babylonia in the time of the Babylonian Talmud, and to a large corpus of texts, which is the subject of my study, that were written on bowls, and they are commonly known as the Aramaic incantation bowls or magic bowls. And this is one example of a bowl. You could see text spiraling around. Some of you may recognize these Hebrew letters, and it was written and about 2/3 of the bowls that were found were written in Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, presumably by Jews. And these bowls were intended more, it wasn't something like we saw with the amulets that people wore. It was more to protect the household from demons, as we will see, many different kinds of demons of all sorts, but also from witchcraft, evil eye, various diseases. Some are also meant to curse others. Some are meant to gain love or favor in the eyes of named individuals. Some are for success in business, and really a wide variety of purposes. This is a very large corpus of text. We're talking about something like 2,000 bowls with not all of them have legible text, but something like 2,000, that up until now about 600 of these bowls were published in scholarly editions and deciphered, and there are many, many, many more that haven't yet been deciphered or published. So again, this is a very new and exciting field. So the bowls, they were discovered first in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, in archaeological excavations in modern-day Iraq, Iran also. And we see here bowls that are faced downwards. They were usually found in that way. Presumably, they were like demons' traps to trap demons inside them, as you would do with, I don't know, a scorpion or anything else. Yeah, no, this is exactly the way. This is just a picture of how they were found in the place they were found, in situ. So this is just a random example of some bowls from this archaeological excavation in the Penn Museum collection, and just different kinds of bowls that we'll see that there's different kinds of scripts. I'll talk about that a bit later, and they're dated again to the period of when the Babylonian Talmud was redacted, which is from the 5th to 7th century CE. That's based on the archaeological reports, and this is a very crucial time in Jewish history because the Babylonian Talmud is one of the most important, if not the most important, composition in Jewish tradition. And we don't have any other archaeological material from this time, or almost no archaeological material from this period. So it could really tell us a lot about the Jews who lived in the time of the Talmud. So in some of these bowls, in the middle of the bowl, there's an image of a demon. These are drawings done by Naama Vilozhny, who has many studies about these images. And so she just reproduced the drawings. And as you could see, these are very frightening demons. I see that you are all very scared right now. So don't worry, because these demons have chains in their legs and in their arms. So they are actually not only trapped inside the bowl, they are also bound also by the words spiraling them and the different content that we find, and also by actual chains. Now, this specific image is probably not a demon, because you see that there's no chains around her or his, probably, hands or feet. But what he does have is a palm tree, a palm branch. As I saw, you have many of those here. And that is really great that you do, because this is beneficial against demons. The palm branch, the lulav, and it probably is an image of someone who banishes and expels demons. Now, I don't want you to get too happy about your palm trees, because palm trees are also very dangerous, and the Talmud says that they have many demons inside of them, so beware. Okay, so except for Jewish, Babylonian, Aramaic, we have other bowls. I said that was about 2/3 of the corpus of Aramaic incantation bowls. We also have in other dialects, in Syriac, which is the Aramaic dialect used by Christians, and Mandaic, the religious group in Sasanian Babylonia. And I mentioned that they're dated, these bowls, to the 5th to 7th century CE. And we even have some bowls with explicit dates, for example, this one, that I will return to later. So now I want to talk a bit about the scribes, those who wrote the bowls. So we have the bowls themselves, but we don't have any exterior description about these people who wrote them. And when we look at scholarly editions of the incantation bowls, you could find that they are often called magicians or sorcerers, sometimes exorcists or practitioners. There's not one word to describe them. And I want to give an example of a text and to really think through these texts, who are the types of people who could have been engaged in this practice. So this is a bowl also from the Penn Museum collection, and I'm reading from a translation of part of this text. So this day of all days, years and generations of the world, I, Komish, daughter of Machlafta, have dismissed, released, and divorced you, Lilith. So we have a woman by the name of Komish, daughter of Machlafta, and it is said that she is dismissing, releasing, and divorcing the Lilith, the demoness. Later in the text, there is more formulations to protect Komish, and there are written in the third person, like, be protected, Komish, and that this angel shall protect Komish, daughter of Machlafta. Now, looking at that formulation of Komish and her dismissed, release, and divorce, we could see other bowls that have it as well. For example, on the left side of the table, you could see that incantation bowl that we just read, and then I, Honik, son of Achat, have dismissed, released, and divorced you, Lilith. The same text, but this time with the same text and also the same scribe, this time writing in the name of Honik, son of Achat. Now, these formulations reminded me of formulations that we find in legal documents that are used for divorce. So the Babylonian Talmud tells of documents that were found, divorce documents that a man wrote to a woman, and there you find the same verbs of release, divorce, that were used to divorce, that a man used to divorce his wife. And what we learn from here is that the incantation bowls have used, the scribe of the incantation bowls uses legal formulations in order to dismiss and to expel demons from the person in one case it's komish, and in one case it's honik, and he puts the name of the client as the person who is releasing and divorcing, just like we have in the legal divorce. Now, this is part of a larger phenomenon that we find in the bulls of different legal formulations. And sometimes they are time designations, meaning giving the specific date. We'll see that soon. Or self-designations, and what I mean by that is that a bull will start with the words, "This is a divorce document," or "This is a document," and other such words. There's different Jewish legal formulae that we know from rabbinic discussions of appropriate legal formulae to use, and divorce, as I have mentioned, perpetuity clauses, such as from this day on, etc., that we also know from legal documents, and different kinds of closing formulae. Now, all of these different legal formulations have led me to think that the people who are writing these different bulls really have specific knowledge of jargon of someone who also writes legal documents. And this is something that Siam Bairo from Exeter University has written about, that maybe the people who are writing these bulls have also wrote legal documents. But I think that and I definitely agree with it, and there are many legal formulations. And for example, this formulation, which is even quite surprising, in the Jewish divorce, in order that the divorce will be valid, you have to grant the woman that is being divorced the authority and power to go and to marry someone else. And this has to be in the divorce. So the scribe of this bull, for example, takes that formulation and to the demon. So it's in order that you, the demon, may have authority and power over yourself to any man that you wish, for I have written to you a deed of divorce and a document of release. So what is happening here is that the scribe is giving the demon permission to go and, possess someone else, and because that is how one would make the divorce valid. And this is a sentence we know not only from legal discussions in rabbinic literature, but also from documents that have survived, such as the Masada divorce document from the 2nd century CE, which has very similar formulations. Of course, the Masada divorce is from a man to his wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, but the bull is a man or a woman, it depends, and the demon that is haunting him. And this is what we saw before, a bull with a specific date, according to the Seleucid era. I have written a divorce document on the 4th day of the week, that is the 28th day of the month of Av, the 919th year, which comes out 608 CE, King Khosrow, which would fit the King Khosrow II, the last meaningful king of the Sasanian Empire. And I would argue that these scribes not only wrote legal documents and magical bulls, but also they were professional Jewish scribes, and that would explain bulls that have biblical passages. We see a lot of different uses of biblical passages, or liturgy, such as the prayer of the Shema and other prayers. And I'll say as a side note that these are actually the first evidence of written prayer that we have, and a lot of times also of certain biblical passages that we have, but scholars of Jewish liturgy or of Bible tend to overlook these texts because, a little like we read before with Margaliot, it seems not so relevant because it's in a magical text. But actually, this is very meaningful for the study of other domains, not just of Jewish magic. And if we come back to the amulets that we saw in the beginning, so this, I said that a lot of times the people who wrote bowls or amulets are called magicians. And this is, and I'm sure that when I say the word magician, everybody here has their own connotation of, I don't know, Harry Potter or others. But actually, saying that the same practitioner wrote the bowl and inscribed the amulet is not necessarily what happened, because if you look at these two different objects, the bowl, person who writes on a bowl has to have great expertise in specifically writing, in writing with ink. If you'll all go home and take a soup bowl and start writing with ink, letters, you'll find that it is very difficult to do this. It's definitely not an easy thing to do. And it's someone who has, it's not just, I'm not learning this just from the legal formulations, but just looking at the material aspect, this is someone who knows how to write. On the other hand, the metal amulets, which is also very difficult, there's many times miniature letters, but it's actually a very different craft, a very different skill. So calling both of these magic and the people who are engaging in this writing magicians or sorcerers, we lose the social context, and we maybe create this, bubble of magic and magicians that in practice may not reflect the actual social and cultural context. And this, when we decide to look at it differently, then this could actually be very fitting of things that we also find in rabbinic literature. For example, I want to bring a nice story from the Babylonian Talmud that tells this. Reeds that are near the city have no less than 60 demons. A certain town official went and relieved himself among the reeds and was endangered. A certain sage, a rabbi, came and wrote for him an amulet against one demon. He did not know that the reeds held 60 demons. He heard them, the town official, then heard the demons rejoicing and singing in it. Master's scarf is like that of a sage, but we have examined him, and he does not know how to bless. So up until now, the story is that a town official went to relieve himself among the reeds, and then he was endangered because there are 60 demons there. And a rabbi came and wrote him an amulet against one demon, and the demons are so happy because he didn't catch them, and they started singing that even though he looks like a rabbi, they tested him, and he doesn't know how to bless, a euphemism for cursing. And then another scholar comes, and he knew that the reeds held 60 demons. He wrote an amulet for 60 demons, and he heard the demons say, "Remove yourselves from here." So this story is very much fits the practice of the bowls. First of all, you need to be precise. Just as when you're writing a legal document and you want to, make some sort of business deal with an amount of people, you have to state everybody that is involved in this deal. You can't just state one, and this is what we saw in the bowls, that there's legal jargon and legal precision. So we see that. And also the person who is supposed to know how to do this is not a magician or a sorcerer, it's a rabbi. That's his job. He's supposed to know how to exorcise the demons. I want to speak a little bit about what I'm working on now, and that has to do with aspects of daily life. So we saw this in the chariot race amulets or curse texts, and something that I think is could be very interesting is try to use these texts in order to gain more perspectives and learn more about daily lives of Jews and also non-Jews from late antiquity. So one example is what we know about the synagogue. So a lot of research has been done about the synagogue with findings of different mosaics in Israel and different motifs and thinking about the synagogue as a place of gathering, etc. But in the bowls, we find a very different function of the synagogue. So this is a bowl that is intended to refute curses that were performed against the person who commissioned the bowls. And there's a list of what kind of curses and sorceries. So the list is sorceries of the cemetery, and sorceries of the house of idols, and sorceries of the synagogue, and vows of the cemetery, and vows of the house of idols, and vows of the synagogue. So we see here that the synagogue is a place where people performed sorceries and curses. And this could actually fit other accounts we have, going back to Antioch and to Chrysostom, this is a polemic against the Jews, but in this polemic, he has this quote. I asked him why he, the Christian, rejected the church and dragged the woman to the place where the Hebrews assembled, literally the synagogue. He answered that many people had told him that oaths sworn there were more to be feared. So we have here again, like we saw in the beginning, that there was a text and archaeological finding that both attest to something that we not necessarily knew about the synagogue, and that the synagogue is a place where it is more effective to swear and to curse. And I don't know, maybe this will be also practical advice that you could take from this talk. So that's one thing that we could see. Another, this is a totally different aspect, is aspects of business and daily life. So this is a text that is intended for business success. And I'm going to just read from the quote here. May there be healing from heaven for Wartan, son of Mirai, and for the threshold of his house, and for the prosperity of Wartan, son of Mirai, and for the coming to him of men and women, Jews and Gentiles, strangers and relatives, and of those who are honest and dishonest, and male servants and female servants. May they come and deal with him with regard to his livelihood, namely Wartan, son of Mirai. May you seek and bring to my door and to my entrance and to my gate, I, Wartan, son of Mirai, the businessman and the seller and the purchaser, upon a good smell and upon good fragrances. So we are suddenly not like the literary text. This is an actual person that maybe this bull was in his house or in his business, and we could really feel the marketplace and all different kinds of people that are coming, and the good smell and the fragrances, and it gives a whole other life to this period. And the last thing I wanted to mention is the demons. So there's very elaborate demonologies, families of demons. They are described as old, young, men, women, really any kind of demon you could imagine. Of course, this is very, very frightening. The Talmud also says that every person has, in every moment, 10,000 demons on his right and thousands of demons on his left, and we are all surrounded by demons all the time. So this fits what we find also in the bowls. And in the bowls, what is interesting is because they were commissioned also by men and also by women, we find different fears of demonic attacks and sometimes demonic sexual attacks of male demons to the women and female demons to the men. And this is something that could teach us a lot about different kinds of fears and anxieties from the time. The last subject I want to mention is the different spectrum of scribes that wrote the incantation bowls, because up until now I really emphasized the more Jewish bowls with specific Jewish terminology and formulae. But when you look at research on magic bowls, you will oftentimes find that they are described as popular and also as syncretistic, mixing different religious motifs one with another. And for this, many things are quoted. For example, a Jewish bowl with an invocation of Jesus. You could see here Hebrew letters and Jewish Babylonian Aramaic, but instead of citing a more kosher deity, they are actually citing, and they're invoking, and I'll read, by the name of I that I am, Yahweh Tzebaot, and by the name of Jesus, who conquered the height and the depths by his cross, and by the name of his exalted Father, and by the name of the Holy Spirits forever and eternity. Amen, amen, Selah. This press is true and established. So alongside the Jewish bowls that we have, that some of them I mentioned, we have some a Jewish script and an invocation of Jesus and the Trinity. And we also have bowls that do not have legible script at all, rather these graphic symbols. Many bowls, dozens of bowls have graphic symbols. Once they were referred to as pseudo-script bowl. Now a scholar by the name of Daniel Waller and others have suggested that these are actually on purpose and they were maybe like demon language or something like that. So we have different kinds of bowls, and also bowls like those I have mentioned with a lot of different Jewish motifs. So in a joint article that I wrote with Simcha Gross from Penn University, we studied the different dispersion of the bowls, and we saw that this is not, we don't find the various motifs from different religions together. Rather, we have, on the one hand, very bowls with a lot of Jewish motifs, and on the other hand, bowls with non-Jewish motifs, and they from what we have seen up until now, they don't mix. So for example, this is a bowl that we called a cluster bowl that clusters many different kinds of Jewish motifs. So in just one bowl, we have quotes from biblical passages and mystical literature from the Talmud, etc., etc. And what this really taught us is that it's not that this is magic and popular and syncretistic. Rather, the bowls were just a medium that was written upon. Just like if we would find many manuscripts, we wouldn't automatically assume that we should read them all together. Rather, you could make subdivisions inside this corpus and see that there are some that are very that cluster a lot of Jewish motifs, and some that do not have Jewish traditions at all, rather non-Jewish, for example, Christian invocations. And what this can teach us is that we are probably dealing with different scribes. Some scribes who have Jewish training, perhaps rabbinic training, and on the other hand, scribes that may represent other religious communities that we don't necessarily have a lot of information about. And we also have, on the other hand, in between these sides of the spectrum, also bowls such as the pseudo-script bowls or other more formulaic bowls without any unique content. So this is, for example, a bowl with rabbinic text written upon it. So yeah, I think I can begin to conclude. So I would like to go back now with what we started, and that is Mordechai Margaliot and the Book of Mysteries. And what we saw there was the rejection of Jewish magic. Of course, his scholarly addition is a very important one, but his introduction really could tell us the feeling of this astonishment of these texts and what they may tell us. But what I was trying to show is actually the opposite, that these texts are really part of the mainstream, that it's not some sort of magicians or sorcerers that are in the edge of society. Rather, we could find there, on the one hand, learned texts and people who really were part of the of learned traditions. And on the other hand, because these were written for ordinary people and for men and women, it is also a very unique vantage point, because usually we have the learned elite who is writing, and their audience is also learned elites. So we do not have the voices of wider social circles. And when we recognize that the people who ordered this were just ordinary people who were dealing with a lot of different anxieties, as in every generation, we could start thinking about their lives and various things that we could learn from that. And again, this is just the beginning of a scholarly field which I hope will really be able to advance our knowledge of the ancient world. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
The bowl that has the reference to Jesus.
Yes.
What year is that approximately? Do you know?
So all of the bowls are dated from the 5th to 7th century AD. So I don't know the specific date, but okay.
And then the reference to the Shema, which is different than the one that we pray to, for example. Did you see other variations in your? I mean, I'm just trying to understand.
It's
Text changing.
It's actually pretty similar to what we know. It's just the difference is in the spelling of the in the spelling. That is something we find before there's it becomes standardized. But it's specifically the Shema. So this is from an article written by Dan Levine, and there he brings, it's pretty much the same. The differences are sometimes in the spelling, but it's the same text.
Yeah, I can see the Hebrew.
Yeah. Yes.
There seem to be two different things I sense we're going through here. One have to do with kind of incantations or things that just say, good luck, good fortune, positive things happen to me. The other is much more magic, is about demons and exorcisms. And these are really two different kinds of things. What's the proportion that you see of these two things, and do you distinguish between them? Because they seem very different to me.
Yeah. So I don't distinguish between them. I, as someone standing here in the 21st century, definitely distinguish between them. But I think for someone who believes that demons are real and that they cause, for example, if someone has an epileptic attack and suddenly falls and has a seizure, so obviously there's a demon inside him, like that's the logical explanation. So it's not less magical than, it's not more magical than good fortune, because that's the reality for how he perceives it scientifically. For the person living 1,500 years ago, I would disagree. And magical, what we would call magical formulations, calling upon angels and deities, is also for good fortune and also for combating demons in the same ways. Yeah. Yeah.
So the site that you investigated, is that mainly where Jews live? And is this a common practice with just the Jewish Jews?
Okay. Yeah.
Did the bowl come from the surrounding area and got incorporated?
So that's an excellent question. Unfortunately, a lot of these materials are unprovenanced. What you did see is from Nippur, which we know from rabbinic literature that there were Jews in that area, not the rabbis themselves. So there were Jewish settlements there. But we don't have the archaeological context for many of these bowls, and that's a very big problem. And this is not just a Jewish practice. So I mentioned the Syriac bowls and the Mandaic bowls. The Mandaic bowls, which are from the group of the Mandeans, are also, just as we find Jewish motifs in the Jewish bowls, there are Mandaic motifs in the Mandean bowls as part of the Mandean religion. And we have Syriac bowls, which is the dialect of Christians, but we actually don't have a lot of Christian specific motifs like Jews and Mandeans, and because of that, there are scholars who think that Jews wrote also the bowls that are in Syriac, but this is a subjective debate. Yeah.
Excuse me if this is a dumb question.
I don't believe in dumb questions, so it's fine.
Is Jewish mysticism the same thing as the Kabbalah, or what's the difference?
Well, actually, I really don't think that's a dumb question, because this is actually something that I'm also studying now. This is before Kabbalah. Kabbalah is in the Middle Ages, but we do have Jewish mysticism, what is called Jewish mysticism from this time. It's what is known as the Heichalot literature. And usually scholars distinguish between magic and mysticism, when magic is practical and mysticism is more the divine and the heavenly realms, visions of how the divine, of the celestial angels, etc., and more of a experience of seeing the divine. And that's a distinction made in scholarship. I actually think that these are much more overlapping and they're not separate at all. What magic bowls are actually based on knowledge of mystical traditions, and in the Heichalot literature and later in Kabbalah, mysticism is not separate from practice. So we'll have in the different descriptions also how to use this, because, why just have visions of heaven and angels if you can't use it at the end? You might as well take the knowledge you have and make yourself better with it. I mean, make yourself better, make yourself smarter, make yourself with more friends, etc. Magical practices. So I think there's an overlap between magic and mysticism, and I think a lot of times it's more of a modern notion to separate between them.
So tell me a little bit more about Kabbalah.
No, that's for a different talk. That won't be given by me because it's later and it's a different world.
Okay, so it's different.
Yeah. Yes.
This classic example, I know some differentiations between some of the other bowls you showed, like the direction.
Mm.
The previous examples were all circular. This seems to have some that are
Right.
circular, but then they're going towards the center. Plus, there's a figurine in there.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk a little bit about incorporation of some of the figures that you showed earlier. Were they also, like in this example, incorporated into the bowls, or
Yes.
found somewhere else?
Okay, so it is on the bowl. It's a drawing, but it's true that most of the bowls they're written in spiral fashion, like we saw in examples, for example, this one. But there are bowls that are written in, I don't know, it's like sort of a sun that is, different portions. There's actually a correlation between the dialects and the preference. Jewish bowls are usually spiral, and this is an example of a Jewish one that is written in this way, but it's usually more Mendaic text. In terms of the illustrations that we saw here, so these are our drawings in the middle of the bowls of demons, and in Naama Vilojny's work, she talks about it, that it wasn't just description, but it also had some sort of a function that, drawing the demon and then chaining him, just as maybe it could remind you of practices of voodoo or something, but really making some sort of act. And there is not always a connection between the drawing, or a connection that we know of between the drawing and the text, but sometimes there is a sentence next to the demon, such as, "This is the Mevchalta demon," and then her picture.
Hi, thank you so much. This was fascinating. I was interested by something you said early when you were talking about the amulets. I think you said that many of the amulets belong to men or more women. So I was wondering if you can say a little bit more about this gender aspect, and if you have any speculations or ideas about why it was more common for women to use these things or to resort to these things. And also, if you think that perhaps some of the scribes for these ones could be also potentially women. So I was thinking about what you said about amulets sometimes being related to birth. And I was wondering if there was any practice of midwifery, like I'm scholarly ancient Greece, so if there was a practice of midwifery and some of these things could be associated with some medical practices and such.
Okay, thank you. I will, this is not my area of expertise, but I could quote Rivka Elitzur-Lyman, who recently finished her dissertation and really spoke about these aspects. So I think about half of the amulets are for women. What she noticed was that in terms of what they were about, that with the amulets for men, we find all sorts of diseases and different things that they want. And with women, it is almost only things that have to do with either childbirth or miscarriages. And presumably, as she writes, these women also suffered from different diseases, but the amulets were focused on that. And then you could speculate, maybe this was because this was the main function of the woman, and buying these very expensive medals would be for something like that, for something for childbirth, which would benefit the whole family. So meaning we can't learn from this that they weren't preoccupied with other diseases, but if someone would purchase this, it would be for that reason. Obviously, the miscarriages and death at childbirth, of course, that was a very big problem, but presumably there were others, and those we don't find. Now, in terms of the practitioners, if these were women, if these weren't women, it's hard to know. But I think that, my assumption would be that regularly, like when we look at metal workers, for example, or scribes in the ancient world, it seems to be a more male practice. Midwifery is a little different than that, but it's something that is very hard to prove. I think in the case of the bowls and the scribes, so we know every description of scribes in rabbinic literature or other is definitely male scribes. And I would think that this could be true also for such skills and expertise. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a woman inside this guild, that there are families who did this, but to think of it just as a woman's practice, I think that would be, for me, it would be difficult to imagine this. And we also don't have some sort of testimony of such a, women's guild who wrote and who were professionals in writing. And it doesn't necessarily, even if there were midwives, this is a different skill than that. So, yeah, if that answered. Any other questions? Can I ask what was the size of any of these objects? The what? Oh, most of the, so most. So most of the bowls are like soup bowls. Cornflakes bowls, I don't know, cereal bowls. The amulets, they're like the pictures we saw. They're very small because they are supposed to be worn and they're rolled up. There are some very, very large bowls, but the most are pretty small. Yeah. They were buried. I would think, we don't have any sign on the bowl that they were used for liquid or something like that. We have later practices from the Islamic period of metal bowls, magic metal bowls that were used with liquids, etc. But there was, in these archaeological findings, also bowls, the same kind of bowls, but without any writings. So they were, common clay bowls also used for other purposes. But these specific bowls, it seems like they were only used to be buried. And lucky that they were, because that's the reason we have them today.
Any other questions? Okay. In that case, let her thank our speaker for this wonderful talk. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming.